Yeah, I got some words for you because, like I said, I was on YouTube and I was listening and I said, man, this man he talks about Malcolm and and he talks about the family, but he never gets into too much details. Then this documentary came out. Who killed Malcolm X?
Mm.
And one thing you did say in one of your speeches is that you said that you knew that the Louis Farrakhan had nothing to do with it because your guys' eyes was on him. That's what I heard. I don't know if you were talking about it, but you said you guys were on him, so you knew he had nothing to do with it. I don't know if you said him or Elijah Muhammad, but you said that you were on somebody.
Yeah. On Minister Farrakhan, a lot of people, when he came down from Boston that night, a lot of things you don't do in detail because we're not just into this stuff ourselves. We got some enemies out here too, right? And they're always trying to exploit any avenue when it comes to us. One of the most powerful forces in the world is the group of people called the African Americans. There's no other group that the West is as afraid of as they are of us. We don't know that and we don't understand that, but they know that and they understand why they must be that. So, you know, there's this documentary, Who Killed Malcolm X? I watched it last night. If it's okay to have a conversation on it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So I watched the entire 5 hours. And, for me, there's very little in it that was new, except the detail he gave on Brother Bradley in Jersey. Some of that detail I did not know. Some of the FBI files I did not see. I've seen most of the files on Malcolm. We were one of the first groups that were able to get that from the government. But the pieces on the trial, the FBI documents, it is clear that J. Edgar Hoover ordered the hit on Malcolm. I mean, he says it. Do something about it. What do you think that means when the head of the FBI tells a field office, do something about this guy, and who they've been keeping tabs on for nearly 15 years, right? Malcolm was at that point a bigger threat than Dr. King to the American government, and
And why do you think that he was a bigger threat?
because he had an international understanding. He had an understanding of international politics. America at that time, 1963, 64, 65, America is trying, at that period, Asia and Africa is throwing off the yokes of colonialism. America and Russia is fighting on who's going to control those countries. It's going to be socialism. It's going to be democracy. Who's going to win what they were calling the Cold War. And America had presented herself as the epitome of democracy and freedom and justice. Malcolm stepped in the middle of that and said, hold up, that's not true. They're hypocrites. They're liars. They're enslavers. They're murderers. They're committing a crime. Look at what's happening in Selma. They're blowing up our churches. They're lynching our people. They're putting our leaders in jail. They're raping our women. They're putting fire hoses on our people, etc. Malcolm brought that to the world. The world couldn't see that, Malcolm went to African leaders who was beholden to the colonial powers for their freedom. And Malcolm says, no, you don't know what you're getting into. We live in it. Here's what it looks like. And it shook the relationship between Russia and the upcoming third world and America. America began to lose that battle. They began to slip from the voice of one man. Because not just that Malcolm was courageous, he was a man who had transformed to a truth being. This dude was real. See, the difference between most leaders and Malcolm became what he was teaching. He was very real. And he was a Muslim. The majority of the people in Africa and what is called the Middle East and Asia are Muslims. So most of the countries that are getting freed are Muslim countries. Senegal is Muslim, Gambia is Muslim, Mali is Muslim, Chad is Muslim, Central African Republic is Muslim, Sudan is Muslim, part of Ethiopia is Muslim, Egypt is Muslim. This is where Malcolm is moving around. And they're loving him because he's this phenomena coming from America, the black Muslim, a people we didn't even know were there. We didn't know they had taken our people there. Here comes now this voice speaking against the most powerful nation on earth, pulling no punches, to people who were shaking in their boots when white Americans walked into a boardroom or a conference room. And there's this one man saying, yo, you don't have to do that. You can stand up for truth. You can stand up for justice. And you can speak truth to power. face to face, eye to eye. And his articulation was so extraordinary that people were listening, and he was changing minds, and America got frightened. And he didn't just start when he left the nation. Remember, he's calling out the CIA on the killing of Patrice Lumumba. And that whole statement, chickens coming home to roost, most people don't know what the statement means. You know, when Kennedy dies, he says there's a case of chickens coming home to roost.
I thought it meant that what they've been doing, it came back to him.
Yeah, you're smart, but most people don't get it. When he says, I'm an old farm boy myself, chickens coming home to roost don't make me sad, it makes me sad. Chickens always come back home at night. They go all over everybody's yard during the day, but at night, because I grew up on a farm in South Carolina, they come back home at night, so you got to go close the coop, right? So what he was saying, you were sending your assassins to kill other people. Those assassins, your assassins, have come back and killed their own president. He accused the CIA of killing the president of the United States. You know how powerful and scary that shit was? Because that's what he had done. He had accused the CIA of killing the president. Now we know they were involved in the killing of the president, but in '63, people weren't ready to hear that.
Wait, hold on. What do you mean now we know? What are you talking about?
Haven't you been watching the documentaries on Kennedy's assassination and the involvement of the FBI and the involvement of the CIA? Okay.
Don't say we.
Right.
You gave me a compliment and said I'm smart, but I didn't know that. Well, the
CIA and FBI and their involvement with the Cuban exiles, who were a bunch of right-wing crazies who were wanted to overthrow our brother Fidel, and so when Kennedy messed up at the Bay of Pigs and didn't give them the cover they needed and air support, they felt that was the reason Castro wiped their behinds out. Castro was going to wipe them out anyway, because you could not defeat that revolution. They haven't defeated it till this day. But then you were not going to defeat the Cuban army. I don't care what you threw on the shores.
Okay? You're talking about when they came on the beach, on the shores?
Yeah. And the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
Kennedy was supposed to give them air cover. But what I'm saying, the air cover wouldn't have done any good, but they felt because they didn't get that air cover, Kennedy betrayed them, and a lot was lost. And you got to remember, there's a La Costa Nostra involvement in this thing, there's a CIA involvement in this thing, there's the Cuban exile involvement in this thing, there's the FBI involvement in this thing, and they felt their own president had betrayed them. So when Malcolm said that y'all send your hitmen to kill the Patrice Lumumbas and the other leaders, now those same hitmen that you sent out to the world have killed their own leader. See, that's what was the hot button piece that nobody ever talks about that. But what do you think coming home to roost mean? It means the people you sent out to do killing came back home and did killing.
Yeah, that's what I got from it. Yeah.
Right? But they, because of Malcolm's ability to speak language and translate it into what he called making it plain, he frightened the hell out of them. And then he was making relationships in the Arab world that had never existed before between African Americans and Arab Muslim world.
Let me ask you a question. It's just me on Malcolm real quick, and then we're going to get to, give me a second real quick. So you watched the documentary.
Yes, sir.
This is my problem. And I was talking to Tazaryach earlier about it. The fact is that it's a shame, not a shame. We look up to Malcolm, well, some of us, you know. And in the documentary, when they found out the shotgun man, they found him. It's a lot of people in the area, in the Jersey area, whomever, even people in the higher ups, knew that he did what he did. So my thing is some people were fronting and acting like, oh, we love Malcolm and we're gonna, but the guy was right there in New Jersey opening up gyms.
But most people didn't know he was there. Now the people in Newark, but you remember Newark was a very big Muslim town, a very big nation town, and a very big Orthodox Muslim town. But most of the cats who were Orthodox Muslim came from the nation. All right. I only learned about this guy. Now, a lot of people, let me be clear on one thing now. There was a lot of people involved in that whole process, and most of them went to their maker shortly after Malcolm went to his. Okay, leave that there. They talked about the leader of the mosque. What happened to him?
Oh, the
So
guy with the glasses. Yeah.
yeah, somebody need to have a discussion about that. So,
Wait, hold on. What's his name again?
James Shabazz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody told me he got his neck slit.
Yeah, somebody said he lost his head. But there was a war going on. But see, there's two things happening. You and I know enough about the street, even though I'm an OG, I know enough about the street that when there's somebody out there in the street who is working for the man, people know he working for the man, but nobody mess with him, you know, unless you hit some real power people. People know who the players for the feds is in our community. Certain people, if you're off in the street, and we know they're protected, so nobody mess with that because they know they can't fight for us protecting them. It is clear from watching the documentary last night and listening to the reading of the FBI files that this guy was one of theirs. This was their man, and they were protecting that man, you know. Now, how many more people were theirs that they were protecting, I don't know. But it's very clear from the information I saw last night that he was one of their protected persons. It came out only about 5 years ago that people start talking about him being possibly the shotgun man, you know. But that wasn't a public knowledge. That was a knowledge within the Muslim circles. And you saw many people. I saw some of my friends. I got a question, a few of them, when the brother asked one of my comrades about him, and he said, "No, don't talk about that. I got to give him a call tomorrow." You know, because he went to the funeral. He called me when he went to the funeral and told me, "I'm going to the funeral, and, you know, report back." Well, first, you know, we need to back up because nobody know who I am. You know, see, that's one of the problems when I talk, right? Yeah. Well, when Malcolm gets killed, I'm in the war, right? But I met Malcolm when I'm 16. And I come home a few months later. Malcolm is dead. Most of the brothers have abandoned ship. Everybody talking, "Oh, I was with Malcolm. I was..." Liars, you know. You ran and you hid for years before you decided to come out and write a book or these other little things y'all doing. Well, I'm the guy that became the imam over the new mosque after his assassination.
What does the imam mean?
Imam means the spiritual leader, the preacher, the minister over the mosque. I am El-Hajj Amin Shahid, Imam of the Muslim Mosque, Inc., the only imam since Malcolm X. Okay. I was also the bodyguard to his sister Ella for 18 years. That's the person who financed much of what Malcolm was doing. So I don't come out of the book. I could probably help to write the book at some point so that people understand. Yes, I'm Professor Small. I taught at City College for 18, almost 20 years. I did that too. But my foundation is in Muslim Mosque, Inc. and OAAU. I was the liaison between OAAU, Black Panther Party, Assata Shakur, Zaid Shakur, Matula Shakur, Lumumba Shakur. That's who I am. I'm Brother Small. Then that's what I was. I wasn't Professor Small, then I was Brother Small. So when I speak, at least you can know I got some foundation.
Understood.
You know what I'm saying? I got some foundation. And so it wasn't easy because many people on neither side, the nation nor on our side, wanted a war between black people. We all knew the feds had their filthy hands in there at some point. And if you heard my speeches over the years, I'm calling out CIA and FBI as being the killers of Malcolm X for decades. But most people kind of stay away from me because they figured that was kind of over the top. But I think after seeing this documentary last night, they're going to realize that wasn't that much over the top. Because when Malcolm came back on that last trip, he had a meeting at Ruby Dee's brother's house, Tom, out on Long Island. And at this meeting, all of the civil rights leaders, all of the primary organizations were present, except Dr. King, but Doc sent the representative. And they came up with a tentative agreement that they were going forward in some sort of working relationship between the OAU and these movements in terms of the struggle in America. That frightened Hoover, because the last thing Hoover wanted was a Malcolm running around the South with Dr. King in them. Fannie Lou Hamer had invited him to come and speak at her place in Mississippi 2 weeks following the date that he was assassinated. Other people, he had been to Selma shortly before that. And, you know, when Doc King was in jail, and he made it very clear to them, y'all better deal with him, because if you have to deal with me, you're going to have another problem. So the last thing they wanted was the fusion of the nationalist movement with the civil rights movement, with the articulator being a Malcolm X. So the feds were irritated and afraid on the home front, and they were irritated and afraid on the international front, because he's meeting with the Kwame Nkrumah, who is running Ghana and is not an American friend. He's meeting with Jomo Kenyatta, the Mau Mau leader in Kenya. He's meeting with Ezekwe, the leader of Nigeria. He's meeting with Ahmed Ben Bella, who was one of the leaders of the Algerian Revolution. And so they were saying, what the hell is going on? How is this guy able to create these relationships? And they were afraid of those relationships fusing with the African American movement in this country, especially when he came back and tried to find some serious partnership with the civil rights movement. You know, even until Jimmy Carter, the fundamental policy of America is that there should be no economic, political, and cultural relationship between black Americans and black Africans. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the national security advisor under Carter, wrote a white paper on the subject and was very clear and spelled it out, that it was a policy of the United States of America to make sure that African Americans and Africans never unite politically, economically, or culturally.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry. Pardon me, G. So I never really, with all due respect, I never heard about Malcolm X's sister. Me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm amazed that nobody really talks about Ella. Without an Ella, you got no Malcolm.
But hold up, well, slow down, Professor.
Let me
backing
it up.
You're going kind of fast right now.
I know.
You went 90 just now.
Yeah.
So, well, you can't say that, because didn't the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, didn't Malcolm hear about him while he was incarcerated? He heard about him, and then he went to go meet him. So where does his sister? I mean, his sister's in his life, of course, but what does his sister got?
That's his mama. His mama's in the mental hospital, incarcerated by the authorities, because in those days they used mental hospitals as prisons, right? When they didn't have nothing they could convict you on in a court, they convict you of being psychologically incompetent, and they can lock you up for longer periods. So his mama's there. Who does he go to live with in Boston as a teenager? That's Ella. But he wasn't just living in the house with Ella. And it's amazing, people do these stories about Malcolm's family, and they leave out the significant element. This lady is one of the wealthier black women in Boston, right, at the time, in real estate. She's one of the most politically powerful in Boston. Matter of fact, she's the guy that take Tip O'Neill, the dog catcher, and make him the city council person, who then become the Speaker of the House of the United States. But they're going to leave him out. It's ridiculous. This is the guy that gave the first senator from Boston the money to fly back to Italy and marry the woman who saved his life when his plane got shot down over Italy during the Second World War. So Ella is a phenomena that they just leave out of history. So she's the one that raises Malcolm until he goes to jail, all right? But she isn't just there alone. Malcolm's got two aunties, Aunt Gracie and Aunt Sarah. His daddy's sisters living in that same house. These three women create the man that you see, okay? Because if Elijah could make him, why didn't he make one of his sons?
Hold on. Whoa.
Just take it like it is.
Slow down, man. Stop it. He went to jail. So if that's the case, you got to say that she created him. He was stealing and robbing. You forgot that? And he was a pimp. You forgot that?
I've been arrested a whole bunch of times, but I never went to jail for no time. I was a good burglar. I got away with my burglary. He didn't get away with his.
But you just said that she. So you trying to say that she.
See, listen, the fact that you go to jail is no sign of being raised badly. Half of the country is criminals. They just don't go to jail. And Malcolm Malcolm didn't go to jail so much over that little burglary thing. He went to jail because he was going with these two white women, two very wealthy, married, upper income white women, who the court tried to get to accuse him of rape, and the women refused to do it. Those crackers was pissed. Y'all ain't gonna call a rape down on him? They gave him the max for burglary that you usually got 2 years of walk on.
So now when so
just want to get history straight now, because
let's get it straight.
And then we talking a big time criminal. He goes to jail at age 20. How long was he out in the street? 18 to 20 months. Is that a big time criminal?
No.
Thank you. Study the history, do the timeline, do the math. But Malcolm pushed that piece because when he started writing his autobiography, he was still in the nation. And the autobiography was a book about redemption, that the nation can take you from the streets and raise you up to the heights. And even when he was out of the nation, from what I understood, he told Alex Haley not to change the book, because the idea was, for so many of us who are in those kinds of crisis conditions in our inner city especially, he was showing that there's an instrument that can transform you and reform you. So he had to big up his criminal part. But how big was that criminal part? Just look at his own autobiography. He wasn't in Harlem that long. When he was coming in Harlem and hanging out, he was working for the Amtrak rail, whatever they call the railroad then. He was making good money if you're working as a waiter on a train. Okay? New York was his end stop. And when he did get off in the street for a minute, he screwed up and had to get out of town like real quick, thanks to his boy Bumpy Johnson. This is another story.
No, whoa. Wait, hold on. Wait, what? Wait, hold on. Okay, time out.
From what I understand from Bumpy Johnson's granddaughter, Margaret, who wrote the script that you're now seeing as the Godfather of Harlem, right? She said Malcolm used to come over to the house almost every Sunday playing chess with her granddaddy, Bumpy. Everybody know Bumpy and Malcolm was friends. The dude that schooled me when I got back home, my mentor was a cat called Sunni Malik. Mm-hmm. Now, Sunni Malik was the biggest gangster in Harlem at that time, not in terms of being over anything, but everybody understood when Sunni Malik walked, nobody talked. Now, Sunni would put you to sleep if there was a problem and somebody in the organization called him. Now, I love my mentor, so that's all I'm going to say about him. He didn't make no bones about the fact that he was a hit man. People said, well, why you praise him for being your teacher? Because he was my teacher. He showed me how to stay alive in Harlem. He protected me in Harlem. And anybody that know me and anybody knew Sunni, know Sunni Malik, Sonny Carson, I couldn't be messed with like that. So you just look those brothers up as time. And that Sunni used to wear a ring on every finger back then. This dude used to wear lace suits. This is before hip-hop, right? He was just the hip-hop before hip-hop. He was one of the brothers that Bumpy put the cover down on Malcolm. Even after Malcolm tell Bumpy to pull your people off, because, you know, you're into the drug thing and it ain't looking good that you protected me after he was out of the nation. The feds snatched him and two other brothers off the street 2 weeks before the hit went down on Malcolm, put him in the federal penitentiary in Atlanta without any charges, and released him 2 weeks after the assassination. What does that say to you? You know, for things that people don't know.
But what I'm saying is this. You met Malcolm when you were 16, yes?
Yeah.
And where did you meet him at?
On 141st Street and 8th Avenue in front of the Food Family Supermarket, which is no longer there. I was a grocery packer. I was packing bags. I came up for the summer. I lived in South Carolina. I saw Malcolm on television. I asked my mom. My mom and pop lived up there on 115th between 7th and 8th Avenue. The mosque was 116th and Lenox. I told my mother about this man because I come out of a very active political family, and I was already active in sit-in and other things at home. And my mom brought me up for the summer to meet this man. And we went to the mosque 3 times and I missed him. I even filled out my letter and sent it to Chicago to join. Then one day at the mosque, they told me and a brother named Dwight Green, that he was passing out flyers against the March on Washington. And it happened to be in front of the store where I was working for the summer packing groceries. In those days, you got paid to pack those bags and stuff. And I met him for about 15 minutes. I remember anything he said to us because I was so mesmerized by this extraordinary figure. The one thing I remember, I told him I was going to leave school in South Carolina, I was going to move up here and join the mosque, and he did a stop on that. He said, education is one of the main things that's going to free our people. And I needed to stay in school, and I needed to get higher education, and then come back to my community and serve them. And so that's what I've tried to do with my life from that moment forward. I never saw him again. I go home. I'm in the Naval Reserves while I'm in high school. So I go home and think I'm Malcolm X. And though I had a full scholarship and a waiver to go to college, the crackers did a trick on me. And the day after I graduated, I had to report to the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. But then there was another white comrade of mine who was my commanding officer, got me out of the Navy after 2 months, and I attended school at Savannah State in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I didn't stay there very long because when I reported for duty at the Reserve Center, got to the door, did the salute, professor. I wasn't professor then. Seaman Apprentice Small reporting for duty first. The cracker said, "Nigga, what you doing here?" I go like, oh, shit. In my little town, the Reserve Center was integrated, not in Savannah, Georgia. So there was an incident, and I got banged around a little bit, but I was cool. And the next month, I go to the Reserve Center, and they assigned me sergeant at arms. That means an armed person to walk you to the bus stop to get back to the school. And there was another attempt to jump me by this group of little hoodlums, and somebody opened fire in the crowd. So I had to leave school right after that. So, I was an angry black dude. I was the first one from my family to go to college. And now I'm kicked out of college on a football scholarship where I'd made the third team. At any rate, I go in the military full time. Malcolm is killed while I'm in the military. My brother, who's a part of the OAU, sent me records, all of the clippings. And this is when I realized, I don't know politics really then. I'm a kid. I'm 18. I get all of these clippings. I make a portfolio, a big photo album. And then CID, a week after I'm showing it around, CID, that's the Navy Central Intelligence Division, go to my locker and take all of my stuff. I still didn't understand the ramifications of it. Mm-hmm. But I knew something different was going on. If you're going to steal newspaper clippings of the assassination of somebody. So when I get out of the military, I come home. A few months later, I go to the OAU, go to Malcolm's sister. 3 weeks later, I'm her private bodyguard. Now, there's some family relationship that we ain't going to get into. But I'm the bodyguard for Ella Collins. I was chosen by her chief security. I moved from New York to Boston to take care of her both in her home and traveling on the highways. And then the rest really become history of my life. 6 months later, I asked to reopen the Muslim Mosque, Inc. because all of the people who were there had left. And so they decided to have a vote. They brought in the leadership from both Sudan, the U.S., Saudi, and they elected. I was at that time the only elected imam in North America. And so I became the imam of Muslim Mosque, Inc., and began to recruit the brothers who were coming back from NAM. And that's how we restructured OAU, restructured Muslim Mosque with soldiers.
And let me second. What did you know about what insight do you know about the relationship between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad?
They were very close. I mean, that before the rip came, they were like father and son. But part of the problem is Elijah had a lot of sons. And so now here's this outside brother comes in, and you build up this extraordinarily close relationship with, and he's your primary spokesperson for your organization. A lot of envy and jealousy develop within the ranks of the leadership, and especially in the ranks of the family. Long before the chicken come home through speech, Malcolm was having issues in the nation, okay? So it wasn't just a rip because he disobeyed and made a speech. Malcolm wrote an article for the newspaper he founded in his basement in Queens, Muhammad Speak. That's where the newspaper was founded. And he wrote an article every issue. But starting in June of '63, his articles was not appearing in the newspaper. He was so busy out here, he didn't pay attention until Ella called it to his attention. But by November, with the death of Kennedy, and he spoke after his leader told him not to comment, and was suspended. Only then that he began to realize that he knew stuff was going on, because the messenger was not well during that period of time. And Malcolm would go and do a lot of his speaking for him, and then orders would come down from Chicago that, no, we don't want you to speak. We're going to send a member of the family. We're going to send one of the sons to speak. He was the national spokesperson, but the leadership was kind of marginalizing him, and then he stepped in it when he made that statement at the death of Kennedy, and he was expelled, and that was the end of his relationship in the nation. I don't think the messenger did anything to kill him, other than, there's a rift going on in his arguments. We see this with Sonetta TV, you know what I'm saying? We see brothers and sisters arguing and going off over issues, and they're not in the same organization. Mm-hmm. We saw the same rift between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. We saw the same rift between Du Bois and the Honorable Marcus Garvey. We saw the rift between Booker Washington and Monroe Trotter. And we didn't learn the lessons from history. And like many organizations, the nation obviously didn't have a conflict resolution element, so that when the crisis came, they could have mediated this conflict. And instead of causing all this pain that has occurred in the black community for 53 years, we might have gotten past the pain and produced something extraordinary in terms of those leaders in that relationship. But we didn't. And what we need to do is learn that lesson today. Because like that documentary, when I first heard of it, I was a little suspicious. Who killed Malcolm? Are they trying to rip open the wound again and have us fight each other again and have us ripping ourselves into pieces again? What is this documentary about? Thank God it wasn't about that. The young man seemed to have done an extraordinary job on research, an extraordinary job on even doing the kind of commentary he did and trying to show step by step what might have happened and who were the players.
So the James Shabazz was the head of Mos 25, yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What happened to him?
From what I heard, he lost his head.
When did you hear that?
Years ago.
So when did he end up missing?
I never kept touch of him, but that's many years ago. Yeah, there was a big rift. Yeah. You remember the two community at that point was blaming each other. Mm-hmm. But let me say this: I learned a lot about the Newark situation. It was more intense than I thought, but I knew a lot about Newark because my teacher comes out of Newark, Camille Wadu, from the mosque there, and Hisham Jabba, the brother who buried Malcolm, because nobody would come forth to bury Malcolm. Everybody was scared. But a brother showed up, tall, lanky, dark-skinned Muslim, out of a mosque in Elizabeth, New Jersey, named El-Hajj Hisham Jabba. Okay? And he performed the janazah for Malcolm. And that was my teacher who taught me Islam, along with another imam out of the Newark Orthodox community named Camille Wadu. Okay, it was a part of the Arabic, or the ancient Arabic Muslim society. They went back before even the nation. So people knew, but for a youngster like me who was their student, a lot of information I didn't have access to. But they were people who was out there, and there was warring going on trying to solve the problem of who killed Malcolm long before this piece. But what a lot of people did not want to look at is the role, and in many speeches over the decades, I've spoken about the role of the CIA and the FBI in the assassination of Malcolm. Those of us, Sonny Malik, are the people, and I got to meet Mr. Bumpy Johnson, and we never had conversations about this because my sister was one of the biggest barmaids in Harlem, and Bumpy would only, when he came to the Rennie Lodge, only Viv could serve him. So I'm in, when you're in the movement, in the nationalist movement, your natural partner was the black gangsters because nobody else wanted to have anything to do with you. And that's where you got your weapons. That's where you got your protection. Those are the bars you hung out in and so forth. And so we know that many of the people involved, because when you have something like that happen, they can say 5 people was in that ballroom. Mm-hmm. It might have been 7, really, when you give all the things that went on, the smoke bombs, the 4 up front, et cetera. But you know, there's more people. It's nothing like that happens with just the cocoon. The cocoon may be the elite element of it. So a lot of people paid a price for that. You know, you heard about Brother Leon Amir, who was from outside, was found dead in the hotel in Hartford during that period. And a lot of people died around Malcolm's death. And on the international front, you had Mr. Cummings, the ambassador from Guyana, jumped out of his hotel window, they said. You had the brother from Kenya shot to death. All the people that was dealing with Malcolm internationally, most of them was killed within a month of Malcolm's death. So,
Hold on, whoa.
Oh yeah, it's bigger than the brother focus on this piece, but it's bigger than that. That's why you know the feds. This was their hit.
Who was you said the Guyanese who?
He was the Guyanese ambassador to the United Nations. I think his name is Mr. Cummings. Mr. Cummings didn't jump out of no window. Somebody pushed him out of that window. You know.
Really?
You had the brother Malcolm was dealing with from Kenya. I can't remember his name now. Age creeps upon you, but he was assassinated within 3 weeks of Malcolm's death, and a number of others. There's the San Francisco Chronicle did a piece, but they name everybody. This is back in '68. They did their piece on it. So I'll try to get that stuff and send it to you. You know.
Okay.
The killing, and there's a lot of good books out on this stuff. You know, Zach Kondo, you saw Zach in the piece last night. The brother, Zach did some good research. There's a book called The Judas Factor, which is another good book to get on Malcolm. There's the Malcolm and Me from the Dead Level by Hakeem Jamal, which is another good book to read on Malcolm. And there's another one, The Life and Death of Malcolm X by Peter Goldman, which is another well-researched piece. There's a lot of information that people don't look at because they don't read the literature of the people who were trying to research this thing through the years. And you'll see that people were clear that our government, if they would kill Fred Hampton, they wouldn't kill Malcolm. We know they killed Dr. King, and they got away with that one. You know,
they said I found out recently that Dr. King's family sued the government and won.
Yes.
Saying that they had I found that out from Al-Abi.
Yeah.
They said Dr. King's family sued.
So if they would, let's take Fred and Mark. If they would kill Fred and Mark for the work they were trying to do in Chicago, what wouldn't they do to Malcolm X, given what he was trying to do internationally and nationally? And it's clear in the literature the young man brought forth last night from the files of the FBI, Hitler gave, I call him Hitler, Hoover, gave the word, right? Do something about Malcolm X. What do you think he meant? Go have a conversation with him? When he said do something, that means handle that.